We are in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 5, if memory
我
suits
们在
me.
以赛亚书第10章的第5节。
God has told Israel what's going to happen to them
神告诉了以色列，他们将会面临什么样的事情。
God is not happy with sin, with people doing the wrong
因为
thing.
神不能容忍这些罪，因为人们当时做的都是罪的事情。
And he's going to send Assyria to be the punisher to take Israel into
他
captivity.
神会利用亚述，然后把亚述呢利用起来惩罚以色列人，管教以色列人，然后他们会被掳。
But the Assyrians are not going to not be punished themselves.
但是呢，亚述呢 is not going to punish themselves.
They also will be punished.
就是他们也会受到神的审判。
The time of their punishment will also come.
他们审判，他们受惩罚的日子也马上就要到了。
Kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall.
国家兴起，国家灭亡。
God is ruler over all.
神永远坐着为王。
And he uses countries to bring about his will for his people.
他用某一国去实现他的旨意，是为了他的这些子民。
So let's read chapter 10, verses 5 to 11. For
那我们
starters.
下以赛亚书这个10章第5节的到第11节。
5 to 11. Mary, you want to read?
你这样是要读吗？第5章第10章5节到11节。
可以到11节是吧？
I don't know who
还
has it.
是我怒一问，手中拿我烦恨的恼恨的杖，我要打发他攻击亵渎的国民，吩咐他攻击我所恼怒的百姓，抢财为掠物，抢财为掠物，夺财为掠物，将他们践踏像街上的泥土一样。然而他不是这样的意思，他心也不这样打算，他心里倒想毁灭，剪除不少的国。他说：我的臣仆岂不都是王吗？加勒拿岂不像加基米施吗？哈马岂不像亚尔拔吗？撒玛利亚岂不像大马士革吗？我手已经够到有偶像的国，这些国雕刻的偶像过于耶路撒冷和撒玛利亚的偶像，我怎样待撒玛利亚和其中的偶像，岂不照样待耶路撒冷和其中的偶像吗？阿们。
Amen.
他们
He tells us that Assyria thinks they're going to do it in their own strength.
看起来亚述好像是按照他们，好像亚述是按照他们自己的能力去做这些事情的。
He has no idea that he's just a tool in the hand of God.
但是他们却不知道，实际上亚述只是神所用的一个工具。
He has conquered Egypt. He's conquered all these other countries that are bigger than Israel.
因为他们当时已经征服了埃及，征服了其他比以色列大的很多的这个国家。
So he thinks that taking Jerusalem is going to be easy.
所以他们想说，那现在耶路撒冷应该是很容易的一件事情。
Notice in verse 11, they've already captured the northern kingdom, Samaria.
我们要知道，在第11节说，他当时已经占领了以色列北国，就是他用撒玛利亚。
This is one way we can identify where Isaiah is in history.
这样我们就可以能够证明以赛亚生活在那个是历史当中是哪个年代。
He's already dealt with Samaria and all of her idols.
他已经处理了所有撒玛利亚和其中的偶像。
He names off the names of his military commanders. Calno, Cargamesh.
他把他所有
Verse 9. Calno, Cargamesh.
然后他命名了他所有战斗当中的这些将军的名字。Is that the name of the commander?
Yes.
我就是说，然后这些然后他们是这样。
I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm out of my mind this morning. Calno, Cargamesh are cities. Hamath, Arpad, Samaria, Damascus. These are locations. These are locations.
第9节说的这些名字都是地名，然后比如说像什么加米努。
But in verse 8, in verse 8, he refers to his commanders being like kings.
在第8节，他是说他的这些将军们都跟那个王一样。
In verse 5, God says that Assyria is like a tool in God's hand, a club of wrath.
第5节，神主要说亚述呢是他用的一个工具，然后这样他恼恨的杖一样。
But the king of Assyria thinks that he's just his own person doing what he likes to do, conquer other nations.
但是亚述王不这么认为，他认为呢，他就是靠他自己，然后他就可以征服所有的。
Sometimes people do God's will without knowing that's what they're doing.
有的时候人们在实现神的旨意，他根本不知道这是神的旨意。
All things work together for good for those who love the Lord.
万事互相效力，要爱神的人得益处。
Those who are called according to his purpose.
那些是根据他的旨意所被呼召的。
And so when the Lord has finished all his work against Jerusalem, what is he going to say?
那当神审判完以色列的时候，他会说什么？
We find that out in verses 12 to 14. If you want to read, say amen.
如果我们在12节到14节当中就可以看见，如果想要读的话，可以说阿门。
And I don't know who has their Bible. Amen. Good. I don't know whose Bible is open. I heard a lot of people want to read. Pick one, Billy.
OK， 流畅。
OK， 我一翻过来，他就会花时间。这样的，是这样的。第几
？12到
10到14。
12。
主在西安山和耶路撒冷成就他一切工作的时候，主说：“我必罚亚述王自大的心和他高傲眼目的荣耀，因为他说我所成就的事是靠我手的能力和我的智慧，我本有聪明，我挪移列国的地界，抢夺他们所积蓄的财宝，并且我像勇士使做宝座的降为卑，我的手够到 列国的财宝，好像人够到鸟窝，我也得了全地，好像人拾起所弃的雀蛋，没有动翅膀的，没有张嘴的，也没有鸣叫的。阿们。
Arrogance never wins points with God, favor with God.
在神的眼里，神不喜悦那些高傲的人。
He says, I'm going to punish Assyria.
他说我将会惩罚亚述。
The king of Assyria is going to be punished for 2 reasons.
我必罚那个亚述王，因为是2种原因。
Pride in his heart,
他自大的心，
and a haughty look in his eyes.
然后高傲的眼目。
His heart's not right,
他的心是不是正确的？
and we know his heart's not right because of his eyes.
我们知道，因为他的心是不正确的，因为他的眼目是不是正确的？
We've all seen haughty eyes, haven't we?
我们都看过高傲的眼神，是吧？
They are half closed.
他们有点像半睁开那个样子，
And they look down their nose at people.
然后他们就是趾高气扬的，就像往下看那种。
And sometimes they don't even have a smile.
有的时候他们也嘴角也没有笑意，
And sometimes they have a condescending smile.
有的时候他们有那种像谴责的那种，就是笑意似的那种。
I spent a lot of time teaching young children to look at a person's face.
我花了很长时间教小孩子们怎么样看别人的这个就是脸，
To look at a person's eyes. To look at a person's
你要看那个
eyes.
人的眼神儿，看那个人的眼神儿。
People who can look at somebody, you can see through their eyes into their soul.
一个人看什么东西，通过他的眼睛可以看到他的灵魂。
Eyes are known as to be the window to the soul.
眼睛是心灵的窗口。
And this is why you teach people not to look at you while you're talking to them.
这就是为什么，就是你教别人，当你跟他讲话的时候，不要让那个人看着你，
Show some respect, look down on the ground.
你要表示尊敬，然后是头往下看。
I think I've shared with you all the trouble I had coming from Korea to America.
我相信我可能讲过，我当时就是刚从韩国搬回美国生活的时候，当时所经历的事情。
I was raised in the Orient where you look at the floor when you're being talked to, when you're being punished.
我是在亚洲长大，所以呢，当时我从小的教导就是，当别人批评你的时候，你的头是往下看着地的。
That is the cultural position you take when you're being dealt with by your superiors.
这个是你所呈现的姿态，就是当地位比你高的人跟你讲话的时候，你所呈现姿态就应该是这样。
When I came back to America, I was in public school.
当我回到美国之后呢，我去公立学校。
It wasn't 2 or 3 days and I was in the principal. I forget what I'd done wrong, but I'd done something wrong.
大概是第2天、第3天，然后他不记得他做错什么事了，但我记得我做错一些事情，都被叫到校长办公室了。
And when the principal talked to me, I looked at the ground in front of him. I bowed my head like I'm supposed to.
然后当校长跟我讲话的时候，我的头就是往下低着看着地板，就像我一贯那么做的似的。
The principal was not going to have any of that.
校长从来没见过这样的孩子。
He said, Sonny boy, you look at me in the eye while I'm talking to you. You look at me.
他说你要看着我，我跟你讲话的时候，你的眼神要看着我。
In America, you look at the authority while they're talking to you to show respect.
在美国，当这种有权威的人他跟你讲话的时候，你表示尊敬的方式就是看着他的眼神。
I was one confused little boy.
当我很小的时候，我就很困惑这些事情。
Do you look at people while you talk to them, or do you just kind of glance at them? It depends on the culture.
当别人讲话的时候，你是直视他的眼神呢，还是就是偶尔的那种，就是看一眼？然后这个真的是跟文化有关的。
But in this passage, God is going to punish Assyria.
但是在这个章节当中呢，神会惩罚
The king of Assyria is in trouble because of his heart and his eyes that give it away.
亚述王呢受到惩罚，是因为他自大的心和高傲的眼目。
This is what the king of Assyria says. I have done this myself.
这就是亚述王这么说的，他说我是靠我自己能力做的。
My brain and my brawn, my wisdom and my strength have gotten this.
这是我的那个智慧和我的这个能力让我自己做成的。
I'm just smarter than anybody else.
我比所有人都聪明。
And I'm stronger than anybody else.
我比所有人都有能力。
That's how I remove the boundaries of other nations. That's how I plunder their treasures.
这就是我怎么样挪移列国的地界，抢夺他们所积蓄的财宝。
I was like a man reaching into the nest of birds to steal eggs.
我像勇士一样，我向那个别人去，好像人拿到鸟窝一样。
Just like you reach in to gather eggs out of the nest, that's what I've done to the wealth of these nations.
我的手拿到列国的财宝，好像人拿到鸟窝一样。
Have you ever tried to take eggs away from a wild bird?
你曾经从那个就是你曾经试着就是从去拿过那个鸟蛋吗？
I know if you have hens, chickens that you're raising for eggs, you go get the eggs every day. The chickens don't say anything.
我知道，如果你自己养那个小鸡的话，小母鸡的话，它下蛋，你每天把这个鸡蛋给拿走的话，这个鸡是没什么太大反应的。
They've gone out to look for more food in the garden. They don't care about you getting their eggs.
小鸡会出去觅食去吃东西，所以它不在乎你拿不拿它下的这个蛋。
But if a bird has built a nest in the eaves of your house and you try to go up and fool with those eggs, what do those wild birds do?
但如果小鸟在你的家的房檐上，如果建了一个就是鸟窝的话，然后它下了一些小蛋，如果你去拿的话，这些鸟会怎么样呢？
They try to distract you from their nest, number one.
第一个，他们试着吸引你，让你的注意力不在他们的鸟窝上。
And then they will actually fly at you to attack you and scare you away if they can.
然后其次呢，他们可能会直接就像飞向你，像攻击你似的把你吓走。
Now, if you don't live in the country, you might not know all of that, but a country girl knows this.
如果你是居住在一个乡村的，如果你不居住在像那个乡村的环境，你可能不太懂，但一般居住在乡村的人都比较懂。
That's the illustration Isaiah uses here.
这就是那个以赛亚在这里用的比喻，就是这样的形式。
While their eggs were being stolen, they were so scared they did not even flap their wings or open their mouth and chirp.
就是他们的这个蛋呢，他们的雀蛋被别人所拿走了，但是他们的翅膀都没动一下，嘴也没张一下，也没有鸣叫。
That's how powerful the king of Assyria was.
这就是亚述国就是多么强大的时候。
And that's why he thought it was in his own strength that he was doing this.
这就为什么他认为亚述王认为是他自己的能力做出这样的事情。
But he was merely doing God's bidding against God's people who had forgotten who created them.
但是实际上他仅仅是做那个神的旨意，神用他来惩罚他的这些悖逆的子民，但是他却忘了这个宇宙是有一个创造主的。
Do we sometimes say our children have gotten too big for their pants?
有的时候我们说小孩子太大了，这个裤子就是太小了。
Don't most children reach a point where they think their parents are stupid and that they are the smart ones?
是不是小孩子都会到达这个阶段，他认为他们是聪明的，他们的父母呢是不聪明的。
I know a young man who went off to university thinking his parents were the dumbest people on earth.
我知道有一个人，他去了大学，他就认为他的父母是全世界这个最笨的。
6 months later, he came home on holiday.
然后他回家过节。
He was amazed how much his parents had learned in the 6 months he'd been gone.
但是当他回家的时候，他发现当他离家了这6个月，非常惊讶，说父母居然学了这么多的东西。
The older we get, the more we realize how smart our parents were.
我们年纪越大，我们就越认识到我们的父母是多么的那个有智慧。
And we start to pay attention to some things they told us that we did not listen to.
然后我们开始注意到以前他们告诉过我们，我们当时不听的这些事情。
And sometimes it's too late.
有的时候已经太晚了。
Let's read verses 15 to 19. Say amen if you want to read.
第19节，如果想要读的话，就是阿门，阿门。
Okay, so how?
15节到第多少节？
19节。
好的，母岂可像用斧砍木的自夸呢？锯岂可像用锯的自大呢？好比棍抡起那举棍的，好比杖举起那非木的人。因此，主万军之耶和华必使亚述王的肥壮人变为瘦弱，在他的荣华之下必有火烧起，如同灭烧一样。以色列的光也如同焚烧一样。以色列的光必如火，他的圣者必如火焰，在一日之间将亚述王的荆棘和吉利焚烧尽尽，又将他树木的肥田的荣耀全然烧尽，好像拿军旗的昏过去一样。他林中剩下的树必稀少，就是孩子也能写其数。阿们。
阿门。
Is the axe greater than the hand that swings it?
那这个斧岂可就是比那些就是用这个斧的这个手这个还要大吗？
Can a saw boast against the man who uses it to cut with?
锯岂可像用锯的自大吗？
Can a stick, can a rod, can a club talk back to the one who holds it in his hand?
像那些好比棍抡起那举棍的，好比杖举起那飞木的人。
The answer is obvious. The one who holds the tool is
这个答
greater
案是
than the
很明
tool.
显，
The one who holds the tool is greater
那
than
那
the
些
tool.
那些使用工具的人，就是比那个工具是要大。
And God is the one who uses us as tools.
但神是把我们使用当成一种工具。
Now, there are people who think that we created God as a tool we can use to control other people.
很多时候我们认为我们是神所 It's like we were created by the God and that has been used by the God to control other people.
Some people think we created God.
有一些人是认为我们创造了神，然后我们用神这个工具去控制其他人，就我们创造了宗教，宗教去控制其他人。
And we use God as a tool to control other people.
我们把那个神呢当成一种工具，是为了控制别人。
An angry God is a club in our hand to control our children.
然后一个是生气的，一个就是这个神，就像我们手里的杖一样，我们可以去管教我们的孩子。
And that is the question we all have to decide for ourselves.
但这是一个我们面临的问题，我们要自己去做决定的。
Did God create us or did we create God?
神创造了我们，还是我们造了神？
The Bible teaches God created us.
圣经告诉我们是神造了我们。
And Isaiah's words here teach that.
以赛亚的这个话在这里呢，也是教导是这样的。
And God has more than just nations to use to accomplish his purpose.
神不仅只有这些国可以去运用，是为了达成他的使命。
Verse 16 says, God will send a wasting disease among these sturdy warriors of Assyria.
然后在这里呢，16节他说，主呢万军之耶和华必须亚述我肥壮的人变为瘦弱。
The light of Israel become a flame, a holy one aflame. In a single day, it will burn and consume his thorns and briars.
然后它非常荣华呢，就是如同焚烧一样，必有火着起。
What is stronger, light or darkness?
哪一个是更强？是光还是黑暗？
We all know that light is stronger than darkness.
我们都知道光明大于黑暗。
In the darkness, you light a fire and you're in control of the animals.
在黑暗当中，如果你点燃一束火的话，你就可以去控制那些，你就可以控制那些野兽。
We all know that animals fear fire.
我们都知道动物是怕火的，
We control fire.
我们可以控制火。
When fire gets out of control, it's deadly.
但是如果火失去了控制，那就是非常危险的。
But we control fire every day, don't we?
我们每天都控制火，是不是？
In the old days, we cooked with it, we heated with it.
在过去的时候，我们是用火煮饭，我们是用火来取暖。
Now we use fire to create electricity.
像现在用火能够制造出电，
And we heat with electricity now, but the fire is there. At the turbines,
但是我们用电来，
God
但是我们那个是用电现在来做饭，但是呢，火还是在那里，它就像一个就是那个漩涡似的那种驱动一样。
mankind has learned how to use the elements in the universe to control our environment.
人们是学会了 人们学会了怎么用宇宙当中的这些元素，然后去控制我们的环境。
But God is the one who created the universe. He created all of that we use.
但是神呢是这个创造万物的主，他是把这些东西创造出来，我们才能应用的。
Science teaches us we cannot create matter, we can only rearrange it.
科学告诉我们是无法创造物质，我们只能重新排列物质。
God is the one who created the universe.
神是创造宇宙的那一位。
Not only can he send a disease, look at verse 18. Famine. Food is needed.
不管他不但可以可以他不但可以使用一些就是疾病，而且呢，他还可以使用一些饥荒。我们看一下这个第18节。
The fertile fields producing the food that we eat can be completely destroyed.
然后这个田间是产我们所吃的那些粮食的，然后全都是被毁尽了。
In the 1800s, a man in Great Britain said there are three things that keep population under control.
在这个18世纪，然后英国有一个人，他说有3件事情可以让人口得到控制。
War,
战争、
disease,
疾病
and famine.
和饥荒。
These three things keep the population under control, don't they?
这3样东西可以使人口的数量得到控制，是吧？
And everybody in the university said, wow, this guy is smart. He's a genius.
那所有人都说，哦，这个人真的是太聪明了，他就是那个天才。
If we want to reduce the population on the planet, let's have some wars, let's create disease, and let's starve people.
那如果我们想让这个世界上人口减少的话，那我们就发起一场战争，我们或者是有某一些疾病，或者是我们就是让人们挨饿。
And they call this science.
然后他把这个就叫做科学。
Now, these words in Isaiah chapter 10 were written long before the time of Jesus. A long, long time ago, 3,000 years ago.
我们知道，我们现在这个读的这个话语，在第10章就以赛亚书当中，这个是在很久很久以前的事情，就是在耶稣呢在诞生之前的事情，那距离我们也是3000年前的事情。
And it declares,
在耶稣诞生300年之前的事情。
it declares that God's in control of war, disease, and famine.
他在这里说的是，神是可以控制战争、疾病和饥荒的。
He's given us free will to do what we want to do.
他给了我们自由意识，我们可以做我们想做的。
The king of Assyria has conquered other nations. Why not one more? Let's get Jerusalem too.
然后这个亚述王就是一直都是在侵占各国，为什么不再多占一个呢？让我们把耶路撒冷也占了吧。
But his desire to go after Jerusalem is part of God's plan.
但是他想侵占这个耶路撒冷，实际上他的计划也是神旨意当中的一部分。
And when the time comes for Assyria to be punished, God was going to use disease.
但是轮到亚述得到审判的时候，那时候呢，神用的是这种疾病
and famine.
和饥荒。
So God's people knew about war, disease, famine long before the 1800s, when Malthus dreamed it up in his head.
但是呢，作为神的子民，我们知道，就是在这个18世纪以前， 我们都知道，就是神用了这3样东西：战争、疾病和饥荒。
As we extend our
What's the name
understanding,
of the
Malthus is the
no,
man.
no, go ahead.
Malthus, Malthus, Malthus is the man who said 3 controls to population.
他刚才说的那个就是那个人，他的名字就是他当时总结的这个观点，就是3样东西可以控制人口。
As we extend our knowledge and take dominion of the earth, we discover the Bible already talks about it long before we discover it.
我们觉得说我们的智慧和知识自己发现了这些东西，可是实际上圣经很早以前就已经阐述了这样的事情。
And we discover in verse 20, God redeems his people.
然后我们看这里是在这里，然后第20节他说是有剩下的，
So
神
let's
赎了剩下的这些人。
so if you want to read verses 20 to 25, say amen.
如果你想读20到25节的话，就说阿门。
阿门。
Okay, Julie, go for it.
好的。到那日，以色列剩下的和雅各家所逃脱的，不再依靠那打击他们的，却要诚实依靠耶和华以色列的圣者，只剩下就是雅各家所剩下的，既归回全能的神。以色列啊，你的百姓虽多如海沙，唯有剩下的归回。原来灭绝的事已尽，必有公义实行，如水涨地。因为主万军之耶和华在全地之中，必成就所定规的结局。所以主万军之耶和华如此说：祝西安我的百姓亚述王虽然用棍击打你，又照埃及的样子举棍攻击你，你却不要怕他，因为还有一点的时候，向你们发的怒恨就要完毕，我的怒气也向他发作，使他灭亡。阿们。
Amen.
阿门。
There are going to be a few people who survive.
这里会有剩下的。
The English word is remnant. A few people.
在英文当中用的是渔民，就是一小部分。
They're going to be survivors.
他们是幸存下来。
And they are truly going to be relying on the Lord.
他们要诚实依靠耶和华。
They're going to come back to Jerusalem. Verse 21.
他们21节说他们会回到耶路撒冷。
God promised the Israelites there would be many, many, many people. Now they're just a few.
当时那个神跟他们说会有很多很多人，但现在呢只是剩下的这些。
The destruction is going to be there, but the remnant's going to come back.
尽管那个毁坏还是在那里的，但是呢这些渔民还是会回来。
So he tells them in verse 24, don't be afraid of these Assyrians.
这24节他告诉他们，你不要惧怕这个亚述。
They're going to beat you with a rod.
他们虽然用棍击打你，
They're going to lift up a club against you like they did in Egypt.
他们又照埃及的样子举杖攻击你。
The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt, remember?
我们知道那个以色列人曾经在埃及为奴。
And verse 25, very soon my anger against you will end and my wrath will be directed to their destruction.
25节他说：“我向你发的这个怨恨很快就要完毕了，然后我向他们的怒气将要发作。”
He's angry and disciplines his children.
他的怒气管教他的子民的这个怒气。
Just like you've been angry at your children and disciplined them, haven't you?
就像你就是你的小孩子，然后就像你对你的小孩子发怒管教他们是一样的。
Have your children never gotten on your nerves? Have you never gotten angry at your
你的孩
children?
子从来没有让你生气。
I'd say
你
we've
的
all
孩
gotten
子
angry
从
at
来
our
没有让你
children.
生气过吗？
We've all
我
gotten
们都
angry
对我们小孩子生过气，
and we've disciplined them.
我们都生气过。
But the snake in the
我们都管教
backyard,
他。
but the snake in the backyard, we kill, we destroy.
The snake in the backyard we kill, we destroy.
The mad dog on the street, we kill to protect our children.
所以我们这么做呢，是为了保护我们的孩子。
We punish and discipline our children, but the enemies of our children, we destroy.
我们管教我们的这个孩子，但是呢，如果是敌人的话呢，我们会消灭敌人。
After his discipline, God gives us a hug.
在他的管教之后，神都会给你个拥抱。
When we're an enemy of God, eventually we're destroyed.
如果我们是神的敌人，跟神对立的话，最终我们会被毁灭。
What is God going to do to these Assyrians?
那这些亚述神会对他们做什么呢？
He's going to lash them with a whip.
他会用鞭来攻击他们。
At the rock of Horeb, God's children destroyed the Midianites on their way to the promised land.
然后，好像在俄利磐石那里杀戮米甸人一样。
They tried to impede the progress of God's children under Moses and paid the price for it.
他们想要那个就是跟他们争夺当时神向他们许下的这个应许之地呢，他们这么做呢，会为自己的这个行为付出代价。
He also says he'll raise his staff over the waters like they did in Egypt.
他也说，耶和华的杖要向海伸出，把手举起，像在埃及一样。
Moses raised his staff over the waters, it all turned to blood.
当那个摩西把他的杖举起来，当时在埃及所有的水都变成血。
Isaiah says, in this day, the burden's going to be lifted from your shoulders.
当时，然后以赛亚说到那里，亚述王的重担必离开你的肩头。
When you come home out of captivity, the yoke will be broken because you have grown so fat.
然后当你经历过被掳，又回到家乡之后呢，你的恶必离开你的景象，然后呢，那恶也因肥壮的缘故撑断。
You will prosper under captivity in Assyria and return victorious.
然后我们会把你在亚述的那个被掳的情况之后呢，你会变成一种你的丰盛和变成你的得胜。
And when they come back, people will be scared of you.
当你回来的时候，人们会惧怕你。
You will have your supply chain. You'll store supplies at Michmash.
你会有你的你会在密安安放辎重。
Verse 31, Madmenah is going to be in flight. The people of Gibeon are going to take cover. They're scared of you.
第31节呢，人们会惧怕你们，马德米那人躲避，基丙的居民逃遁。
They're going to be angry that you came back.
在回来的时候，这些人都不高兴了。
Verse 32, they're going to shake their fist at you.
然后在第32节说，他们会抡手攻他。
But it's going to be like the days you go to the forest and you cut down the trees and lop off the boughs. Make lumber out of the big trees.
然后这个就像 lumber the big trees.
Lumber, they will make lumber out of the wooden trees. They'll make lumber. Boards.
就像你去那个森林里去砍树，然后用那个树做出那种就是大的那个树木。
And then in chapter 11, we see the image of Israel coming back to life.
然后呢，这11节我们能看到就是这种的画面，就是以色列就是又复活的，又兴起的画面。
After the discipline comes a hug in God's kingdom.
在神的国度当中惩罚之后呢，必有一个大的拥抱。
Let's read verses 1 to 5 in chapter 11.
那我们读第11章的1到5节。
Say amen if you want to read.
如果你想读的话，就是
我来
Okay,
我
Julie.
来读吧。
Jenny, go ahead.
OK， 从那耶西11章是吧？11章第1到第5。从那耶西的本必发一条，从他根生的枝子必结果实。耶和华的灵必住在他身上，就是使他有智慧和聪明的灵，谋略和能力的灵，知识和敬畏耶和华的灵。他必以敬畏耶和华为乐，行审判不凭眼见，断是非也不凭耳闻，却要以公义审判贫穷人，以正直判断世上的谦卑人，以口中的杖击打世界，以嘴里的气杀戮恶人。公义必当他的腰带，信实必当他肋下的带子。阿门。阿门。阿门。
Isaiah is caught up in the spirit in these 5 verses.
在这个和那个经节当中呢，它是讲的是这种耶和华的这个灵。
Jewish rabbis before the time of Christ thought this spoke of the coming Messiah.
就是很久以前，他们认为这个是讲的是回来的这个弥赛亚。
Not just a remnant coming back to Jerusalem, but out of the remnant is going to be a leader, a Messiah.
并不只是这些剩下的人回到了，而是说从这剩下的人当中会出来一个弥赛亚。
A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. Verse 1.
从耶西的本发出一条，从他根生的枝子必结果实。
We've all seen after you cut down the tree, a little shoot grows out of the stump.
我们都知道，当你把树砍完之后，剩的那个树墩，然后都会有一个小的那个枝从上面长出来。
And you get another tree.
然后你就会长成另外一个树。
And this is going to have fruit, it's going to bear fruit.
然后它必结果实。
And in verse 2, it says, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. One person.
然后第2节是耶和华的灵必住在他身上，一个人的身上。
The Spirit of the Lord will rest on one person.
那神的灵就住在一个人的身上。
The Spirit of the Lord came down like a dove and rested on the shoulder of Jesus at his baptism.
当耶稣受洗的时候，神的灵化成一个白鸽，然后落在他的肩上。
The Spirit of the Lord is described as the Spirit of wisdom.
然后神的灵描述了，然后神的智慧
Understanding.
和聪明的灵。
It's the Spirit of counsel and power.
它也是谋略和能力的灵。
The Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord.
知识和敬畏耶和华的。
He, a singular person, will delight in the fear of the Lord.
他这一个人必以敬畏耶和华为乐。
The person who fears the Lord is to be praised.
那些敬畏耶和华的必得称赞。
We should ask ourselves, what does God want us to do?
我们应该问我们自己，神让我们做什么？
What is God doing? How can we help him?
神在做什么？我们怎么样能够帮助他？
We should live in awe of the one who created everything.
我们应该居住在那个创造所有万物当中，创造所有万物的这个人当中。
The one who sent his only son, Jesus.
他派了他唯一的爱子。
The Jewish rabbis thought this was talking about the coming Messiah.
这些就是犹太的那些学者认为这些讲的是要再来的弥赛亚。
This person is not going to judge by what he sees with his eyes or hears with his ears.
这个人呢，他的审判呢不凭眼见，断是非呢不凭耳闻。
But he's going to judge with righteousness and justice.
他要以公义和正直审判。
Some people are needy out of laziness.
有的人呢，他是因为他穷，是因为他懒。
Some are needy and poor through no fault of their own.
有一些人呢，就是很穷，然后呢，也是非常需要帮助。这些呢，不是他们自己的缘故。
Floods, famines, wars have affected them, and they had no control over it.
因为我们说的这个疾病、战争和饥荒可能影响了他们，这些是他们无法自己控制的。
God is going to judge people righteously with justice.
神会用公义审判人，也是很正直。神会用公义、公正审判人。
If we believe that when a person dies, that's the end of their life, justice must take place before they die.
如果我们认为这个人就是死了就死了，就什么都没有，那审判一定会在死之前有。
If we believe in life after death, justice can take place on the other side of the grave.
如果我们就是还有如果我们死后还有另外的这个永生的话，那我们相信审判会在另一边发生。
From the little bit I've seen in this world, if there is no justice after death, there is no justice.
在我眼目所看见的极小的这个世界上，如果在另一端没有审判的话，那这个世界就是没有审判。
But there is a time coming
但是会有这样的时候到来，
a time coming where the justice will be provided.
会有这样的时间到来，这个公义和正直是会有公义和正直。
When Jesus comes back, this is what it's going to be like.
当耶稣再来的时候，事情就会这样发生。
Who wants to read verses 6 to 9?
谁想读一下第6节到第9节？
Do you want to read, Robin?
阿妹，
Okay, Mary, I hear your amen.
张老师读吧。
好的。
I'll do it.
豺狼必与绵羊羔同居，豹子与山羊羔同卧，少壮狮子与牛犊并肥畜同群，小孩子要牵引他们。牛必与熊同食，牛犊必与小熊同卧，狮子必吃草与牛一样，吃奶的孩子必玩耍在灰蛇的洞口，是念灰哈，回蛇的洞口，回蛇的洞口。断奶的婴儿必按手在毒蛇的穴上。在我圣山的遍处，这一切都不伤人，不害物，因为认识耶和华的知识要充满遍地，好像水充满洋海一般。阿们。
阿门。
Isn't that a beautiful picture of how it's going to be?
事情这样看起来是个非常美好的一个画面。
The wolf and the lamb together, the leopard and the goat, not enemies.
狼和绵羊在一起，豹子和山羊在一起，他们不再是敌人。
A little child leading all the animals.
小孩子们带着所有的动物。
The infant playing near the hole of the snake.
然后这个小孩在那个蛇的洞口玩。
Nobody needing to harm each other because we're full of the knowledge of the Lord.
没有人，我们都不伤人也不害物，因为我们都有认识耶和华的知识。
Have you seen the expanse of an ocean?
你看过这个海洋的这个就是边界扩大？
Water as far as you can see.
然后水是蔓延，就是一直在远处。
That's what the knowledge of the Lord is going to be like.
那耶和华的知识就会像这样。
Not today,
并不是今天，
but when the Lord returns.
当神再来的时候。
What a day, glorious day that will be.
那一天它会是个荣耀的一天。
Liu Chung, can you pray for us and then we'll have questions?